Like most experienced hunters, we are particular who we allow to join us during a fishing or hunting trip. Usually, our group included my father, my brothers, my brother-in-law. However, they could not hunt that year, and I was asked by a friend of the family, he was a good and safe hunter, to join him and a group of his neighbors. Our group was going to hunt 3 different locations over the next 3 days, and I was comfortable with most of them, but one guy got so drunk at dinner, he didn't even realize he bought his dinner. We took his rifle away from him the whole 3 days of hunting. The next morning, I was up at 4:30 a.m. expecting to be in the woods by around 5:30 a.m., but I found out that I was assigned to the second pickup truck. Unfortunately, they were going to breakfast at 6:30. We finally got to our hunting location at 7:30 a.m., way after daylight. Our first hunting location was a plateau above miles of timber and a waterway. There were several other vehicles already there. The last thing I was going to do was walk in on another hunter's location in broad daylight. The other 3 headed west for the timber. One guy asked where I was going, so I told him I was going north, as no tracks in the snow were headed that way. He said that he had hunted there before, and that if I went that way, I would be in 40 square miles of timber and swampland. Everyone previously that has gone there has gotten lost, and we had to contact the game warden to find them after dark. I said, "Well, that's perfect. Please note that I will not get lost. I will hunt until dusk, and I'll be walking out after dark, so don't leave me." I walked downhill on a game trail for 150 yards. To my right side was an entanglement of briar bushes 6 feet in height with 1-inch thorns. The briar patch ranged its size from 35 to 50 yards in width all the way to the top of the hill, just short of the parked vehicles and all the way to the bottom of the hill. No one in their right mind would even attempt to walk through those loose, heavily intertwined briars, even with the heaviest protective hunting clothes, because they would be ripped to shreds. It is doubtful if even a vehicle could make it through there. I reached the bottom of the long hill, and a 30-foot wide waterway had to be crossed. A fallen tree allowed access to the other side. It was about halfway across when a tree branch broke and I fell into the icy water. The water was 4 feet deep, and I found the river bottom to be quicksand or silt. Either way, I was trapped. I couldn't move, and I was sinking. I couldn't reach the fallen tree, so now I was in big trouble. During the last summer, I had decided to add a sling to my 30-30, enabling me to use both hands as necessary. I was now just about chest deep, but able to throw the sling over a branch and get myself pulled back up onto the log and continue to the bank. I have been wet before, so once I dumped the water out of my boots, walking was the best way to dry off. I was on dry land again, and where I wanted to hunt was mostly snow-covered, but there were some bare spots. I looked around, but there were not any tracks. To my left was a hill, so I headed for high ground for a panoramic view. The best area looked north, so I trudged back down the hill where I crossed the log. Now there were tracks in between the patches of snow. At first glance, they appeared to be black bear tracks, still not yet in hibernation. It must have seen me fall in the water, and I figured it would check me out, just in case I could be a free meal. I was worried, but I couldn't see the bear, so I went back up on the hill again so as to be on high ground in case it came my way. After looking the area over, I didn't see any movement, and I went north along the ridge, but it dead-ended, so I had to go back down the hill in order to continue north. In front of me, it looked like a very wide and dense patch of wild asparagus. I didn't have a choice, so I decided to plow through it with a chance of running into the bear. I loosened my buck knife and I lowered my 30-30 for a quick shot because it could be the only chance available if a bear was waiting for me. Luckily, no bear, so I moved back into the open and I found several piles of logs and I climbed up on the closest one to wait for an hour because I figured the bear was still in the area. It was quiet, so I just sat still and I watched four separate snowshoe rabbits, which were most undetectable until they moved. I guess they weren't too concerned about the bear in the area. Finally, 200 yards at the north end of the log piles, 7 deer headed east and went across in front of me. They were mostly does, but the last two were bucks. I didn't have a good shot, so I let them go, also expecting something or another hunter tracking them. About 30 seconds later, a hunter on the trail came into view. He didn't see me, so I just watched in case the deer circled around, but they never showed, so I expected that they kept going east. I climbed down from the log pile and I headed north again. Going north and expecting to find deer tracks, but I didn't find any of any kind, which really did not make a whole lot of sense because this is a very isolated area. I kept moving north for several hundred more yards until setting up in a protected area with a great panoramic view. But nothing was moving there either, so north again to another area, but still no tracks of any kind, which again did not make sense because it is a very remote area and undisturbed with a lot of cover. Cloud cover became heavy, and then snowfall became progressively heavier. It was getting close to dusk with heavy snow falling, so I started my walk back to the plateau on high ground where our vehicles were parked. By the time I reached the falling log across the waterway, snow was now close to blizzard stage, but I was able to cross the water this time without falling in. It was now pitch dark with limited visibility due to very heavy snowfall, but I was able to reach where we left our vehicles. Unfortunately, now the parking area was empty as they had all left without me. So now I was stranded in the middle of nowhere on top of an empty plateau in a snowstorm in a blizzard stage. The situation was not good. I had waited for about 20 minutes when I heard a noise downhill, so I thought it must be a hunter, maybe the one I saw earlier in the day. I was glad he was able to cross the log over the water as well. Visibility was at most 10 feet, so I couldn't see him. I yelled down to him, which might help him find his way up the hill. I also figured he must be stranded as well because all the vehicles had left earlier. So I yelled down, "Hello! Just so you know, I'm the stranded hunter waiting up on the plateau above you." I got no reply, so I yelled down again, "If you're coming my way, it's okay, but you need to identify yourself." Still, I got no reply. I knew he could hear me as I could hear him, so I tried one more time and I told him that I'm a stranded hunter with a loaded rifle. Neither one of us need any surprises in this blizzard, so for the last time, will you identify yourself? I got no answer, but now I could hear someone or something heading uphill, but not along the snow-covered game trail. I couldn't see anything, but still could hear perfectly. Whatever was approaching from the bottom of the hill was trying to come up through the briar patch. Well, I could hear whatever it was walking through the briars and the 1-inch thorns because of the snap, snap, snap of each briar entanglement branch being broken as it approached. It was now obvious that this was not a human, nor did I think it was a bear, and whatever it was bipedal. Well, I was now in serious trouble, stranded on top of a plateau with only at most 10 foot of visibility and no options except to stand my ground. I yelled down again to whatever this thing was, and I told him that I don't know whatever you are, but I do not wish you harm. I got no answer again, but it stopped for a few seconds, and then there were more snaps. I yelled down again, "If you continue, I will be forced to send a round downhill in your direction." It stopped again for 10 seconds, and then snap, 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 here it came. By this time, whatever it was had unbelievably walked uphill through 50 yards of the toughest briars that I had ever seen in 30 years of hunting. Also, it is now within 100 yards of my location, and this was not good. I have had experience with 3 Bigfoot before on a fishing trip. They were 8 feet in height, totally black, but they were friendly. However, this was a very different experience, and seriously, I could detect that this was not friendly. Now my back was to the wall, and I was most likely going to have to defend myself before it got too close. I only had a 30-30 with me, so I likely would not stop a Bigfoot, but maybe a warning shot would change its mind. I'm a former 82nd Airborne Division, although not a trained sniper, but I was a sniper spotter. So I yelled down one more time and advised, "Now you've given me no choice and no options. If you come any closer, I will fire. And if you continue to approach my locations as you obviously are doing, the second round will be closer." I got no answer. Then I heard more snaps and more snaps. And even in this blizzard condition, I could still hear perfectly where the Bigfoot was, and I fired, sending around to his location, most likely 3 feet or so in front of him. There was silence for a few seconds, and then more snaps. This was the end of my one-sided conversation. I took careful aim, and I sent another round as close as possible without intentionally hitting it. I knew there were no rocks on the hillside, so there was not going to be a ricochet, but by now, if the Bigfoot for some reason was mad before, it had to be furious by now. Then there was silence again for a few seconds, and then it started coming again. I guessed it was now 50 to 60 yards away, and it was closing. I fired one more round off to its left side just to show that I was not trying to hit it, and hopefully the Bigfoot recognized this fact. Again, there was silence, but it was obvious that it had not changed its mind because 10 seconds later, I heard more snapping. It now had to be just short of the top of the end of the briars, 30 yards in front of my position, meaning with visibility of about 10 feet, I only had 2 to 3 seconds before the Bigfoot will be in full charge on my location. My only option left to live was going to be a headshot, so I prepared to do so, and I backed up a few feet for a possible split second. Just then I heard something on my right. I had backed up about 3 feet because the pickup truck had just missed me as it pulled up on top of the plateau. The driver from a few feet away rolled down his window. I said, "I told you I'd be walking out after dark and don't leave me." I jumped into the vehicle with my loaded rifle. The guy in the back seat asked, "How come you didn't unload your rifle as we're supposed to do at dusk?" My reply was, "You don't want to know. I suggest we move out now." For me, they did not deserve an explanation. However, if the pickup had not returned, that would have been the end of the story. I escaped by just a few seconds of fate. So very happy to share this experience with you, Cam, and your listeners.